there are advancements in the way how we work happening all the time. Some of us embrace it. Some of us choose to fight against it.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 260. Artificial intelligence will not replace you. Devs using AI will. This episode of DevOps Paradox is brought to you by Barbaro Mojo. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darin and Viktor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darin reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Viktor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darin Pope and Viktor Farsic. Viktor, back in February of 2024, you released a video over on the DevOps Toolkit channel, our sister channel, talking about artificial intelligence will not replace you, but devs using AI will. How quickly is this going to happen?
That's going to start soon. I think it's simply, I see AI from the developer perspective as one more tool that makes you more productive. And like any other tool that makes you more productive, it gives you edge over your colleagues or competition, right? I could say the same thing like, hey, let's say that we are all on Vim, developing code, serious code, and then one starts using Visual Studio Code or IntelliJ or whatever is your preference, right? That person is going to threaten your job because that person is going to produce better results than you. Now, I know that there are people who use Vims like a pro and that there are exceptions. I know that there are magicians with it, but excluding those few, that's the situation, right? That's simply yet another advancement that is happening. And you can embrace it or you can fight against it until somebody else says, what are you doing here? Why aren't you as productive as your colleagues? Or why are you bothering everybody non-stop with questions that are easy to answer?
Let's rewind a few years. Is this the same argument that could have been made when people were moving from VI and Emacs to more of an IDE, Visual Studio, Eclipse?
Up to some degree, yes. If you look at it from productivity perspective, yes. Or we can say people who, okay, let's put it something closer to home. We can compare it to people manually executing commands to build something and test something and what's not. And then some other people who adopted Jenkins. Those people, the second group eventually replaced the first group.
Actually, could I make it even more simple than that? Even though I love me a lot of Jenkins. People that used to run commands by hand, other people took those commands and put them in a bash script and then just ran the bash script and checked for error codes correctly.
Exactly. And now you can be fighting it and say, you can come up with a bunch of reasons why copying and pasting commands, individual commands from a Word document is better than executing scripts. And I know that this will shock people, but I heard those as well. I lived through the era when actually I had people who were doing that and insisted that we should be doing that. But now, when you look at it from retrospective, it's kind of, no. You're not working anymore. Or you adapted. And we see that all the time. If you can increase your individual productivity, you have an edge, and you should do it instead of fighting it. Well, we can probably come up with 1,000 other examples. There are advancements in the way how we work happening all the time. Some of us embrace it. Some of us choose to fight against it.
I am one of those that will fight until I eventually acquiesce and finally make it my own idea. Once I make it my idea, then everything's fine.
Just to be clear, we're not there yet. I do not think that AI makes a significant difference in productivity of somebody. What I do think is that it's coming. And yes, you need to make it your idea. I don't care. Yeah, make it your idea. Oh, I think that ChatGPT is, even better example. GitHub Copilot is horrible, whatever. And then you want to save your face by adopting Mistral? Go ahead. If that's what you're trying to say. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't be hating on Mistral, even though I would not choose it for a coding language helper. But okay,
no,
I get
I'm
it.
saying it in a positive way. Kind of, some people will fight against something and then they need to somehow come up with some almost the same yet somehow different alternative, not to look like they were wrong. And that happens as well, and that's fine. Nothing against Mistral. Mistral is amazing.
So let me go ahead and stay there for a second. Back when GitHub Copilot and the other copilots were coming out, people were freaking out about data being sent offsite to somebody else. And that data could be unknowingly or knowingly be used to continue training the models, even if that is proprietary data. I think that's why a lot of people freaked out. I'm in that camp. But when I could see CodeLlama and other models that I can run locally using LM Studio, using Ollama, then that changes the story for me. It may not be as good, quote unquote, but if it solves the problem that I'm having, that's a fine solution for me.
There is a big difference between, and I can generalize this, being opposed with some idea and then looking for a specific problem as a way to completely disbundle that idea, and understanding, on the other hand, the value of that idea, but saying, yeah, okay, so this is actually great, but I cannot use it because, for example, it sends my code to cloud, right? There is a difference between AI is useless and I will demonstrate uselessness by saying that it sends data to cloud, and on the other hand saying, actually, this is really good, but I cannot use it because it sends data to cloud. But then once you adopt that way of thinking, okay, so what are the alternatives, right? If this is good, but I'm prevented from using it because of this and that, how can I solve that problem? Because the idea is valid. Excellent. Then we reach to the point of, okay, maybe Ollama, right? Or there will be more and more solutions like that, right? But that's very different from being opposed to any AI in the first place.
I was never in the camp of completely opposed to it. I was in the camp of, I don't want my data leaving me.
That makes perfect sense. I happen to work mostly with open source, so I found that I see no problem. To me, it's easiest to use cloud services for that. But hey, you work on something that is confidential. Excellent. GitHub Copilot might not be a thing for you. Or I'm not sure what is the exact agreement you can make with Microsoft and so on and so forth. But yeah, we are reaching the point. And this is also important thing to understand, I believe. When something comes along and there is obvious market for that something, you can be assured that soon afterwards there will be other solutions, similar solutions targeting different types of use cases, right? It was inevitable that, and it is inevitable that machine learning will, and it already is there, that in a way that it never leaves your network, right? Simply because it's too big of a market to be ignored.
Speaking of ignoring things, we're completely ignoring everything that's not in the code editor at this point. I do want to visit that again after a while, so let's not forget that. But let's think about languages specifically. Java, Python, the languages do change, but they don't change at a super fast rate. As we're recording this, Java LTS 21 has only been out for a few months. And there were a lot of changes to that, but that's been out in the open for a while that you could have been training models on that, even prior to LTS. So when 21 actually shipped, you could have used it. Same thing with Go, same thing with Python. Talk about Python. Going from Python 2 to Python 3, how many decades was that? Or what it felt like decades.
Even for languages that are, let's say, younger and then they change more frequently, we're not at the level yet that I can say, hey, write this application for me, and I'm going to go and watch Netflix, and I'll come a bit later and click the button to deploy to production, right? We are not even close to that. So whether some tool, whether it's AI or something else, helps me with 10% or 20% or 50% or 90% of the code I'm writing, that's help, right? I will settle for 10% even. If it can reduce 10% of my time, that's a lot. And I can argue that it reduces more than that. Maybe if Go, because I work with Go since the last model was created, Go release some new things and what's not, but still that's not changing completely how I write code. That changes certain aspects of it, right?
I want to go to your 10% again. So assuming you work 2,000 hours a year, true or false doesn't matter. But if it's 2,000 and it's going to save you 10%, that's 200 hours. Now let's do the math on that. If you're working a 40-hour week, that is 5 weeks. So let's think about it this way. Used correctly, AI could actually give you more vacation time, but still keep your employer at the same level of output from you.
Exactly. Let's say that, no, let's go be very conservative and say that it saves me throughout the year only 1 week of work. That's 1 week I can spend on a beach. And as you said, my manager will still be equally satisfied because I produced exactly the same output.
Well, actually, even more, right? Because it saved you a week, but the work you produced, depending on how the model was trained, if it was trained on what the company needs, it probably gave an even better answer than you could have ever done because you've only been in the company for a year and you don't have the 10 years of knowledge you really needed to know to do that one thing.
Oh, that's an interesting topic, what you just mentioned, intentionally or unintentionally. Imagine when we start training general models with our own data. Imagine what will be happening when I have AI trained on internet that I can augment and say, you know what? Here's all the code that this company ever wrote. And I want you to base your suggestions on that. Be it style, be it how we solve problems, or anything else. Imagine when you train it to be like a trained worker in your company. I don't think that we are there that it will replace workers, right? Just to be clear. But when it starts churning out things that are more in line of how you do stuff in your own company. And I don't think that we are far from that point.
Well, there's already a vendor out, and there's probably a few vendors, but one vendor I've heard is SourceGraph. They are not a sponsor. SourceGraph, you can call us. But where they have this concept of code AI, they call it Cody, but it's code AI. But they've also had global search. Again, I'm not going to get into everything that SourceGraph has, but that's what they're basing their business on right now, is taking whatever is your code is, augmenting the models, so when you get a suggestion, do you take that suggestion or not? and if it's trained on what the corpus is for your company, let's say there's a standard way to do something in the company, and you're writing it in Java, and somebody else did it in Go. How hard is it to translate something from Go to Java, or the other way around today using models? May not be perfect, but once it's been done once,
let it be even 10%. Translate, and it's 10% is valid. Still, that's 10% less of what I need to do. And to all those who, I don't want machine helping me, I think that's silly. How many people do not use autocomplete or any of the features of IDEs? And I'm not saying that's AI, but that's a similar type of help, right? Helps me write code faster. Gives me suggestions. So IDEs have been giving us suggestions for a very, very long time, right? How is that conceptually different? Quantitatively, it's very different, but conceptually, no. So whomever is against AI conceptually is against IDEs in a way. Go to, not even Vim, VI.
go back to Edline. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, Notepad.
Notepad, okay. Edline was before Notepad. Okay, so think about this for a second. You get your code suggestion from AI, but you're not really sure yet how to do it. I wonder, I don't know if SourceGraph does this or not, but let's say that suggestion is decorated with information about who wrote that initial thing or who has been using it the most, because you've got visibility to know who's maintaining that code. So if you have a question about it, you could contact them.
Exactly. It's going to change everything. It's going to change everything. We're going to go, I'm not going to even go far. 5 years from now, we're going to look at this time as how silly we were. 5 years.
To where it's normalized, is what you're saying.
But it's normalized and when it's clear what it is. Right now, it's not very clear yet what it is, right? We are in very early stages, but it's moving very, very fast. So I give it, when development is concerned, I give it 5 years for writing code. And then after that, we're going to see serious improvements in operations as well. And I think that that's where it's going, right? Right now, the main focus is on suggestions. But what I really want to see is it running it. Imagine how many decisions it could be making in a live system. When to scale, when to do this, when to do that. That's going to change everything. But that's coming later, I believe.
Well, one thing you don't have to wait later for is your chance to pick up some Barbaro Mojo. Are you ready to spice up your life while you decide whether or not to use AI? Meet Barbaro Mojo, the delicious Cuban hot sauce with a kick that's sponsoring today's episode. Barbaro Mojo brings the heat with their unique Cuban marinade base, adding an unforgettable flavor to your favorite dishes. With flavors like El Habanero, Halibo, Panazzo, and Best Day Ever, there's a perfect match for everyone's taste buds. As a DevOps Paradox listener, you're entitled to an exclusive 25% discount on your first order. Just visit barbaromojo.com and use the promo code DevOps25, that's DevOps the number 2 and the number 5, at checkout to claim your discount. Thanks to Barbaro Mojo for sponsoring today's episode, and the link to that is down in the episode description. So, if in 5 years we are still using IDEs, are we doing it wrong?
No, we will almost certainly use IDEs. That's another thing that I feel that right now AI is going in a wrong direction in many places. And that wrong direction is that companies are trying to embed it into other places like browser, or to give me a standalone application to do something better with AI, which is great. A good example would be, let me change a bit. See, let's say video editing, right? Now you have tools, and I think that you're using some of them. that use some kind of AI to help you edit videos, right?
Correct.
Now, what will happen is that they will slowly disappear, most of them, and because you will be getting those features in whichever tool you're using to edit or used to edit before. Like in my case, that would be Final Cut Pro. And I feel that same thing will be happening with development. When we're talking about writing code, the place where it needs to happen, that's VS Code, or whatever might come and replace it in the future, right? And that's already obvious in a way. I would use GitHub Copilot anytime over ChatGPT, simply because it's where I work. It understands the context of what I work. And by understanding the context of what I work, it helps me avoid copying and pasting things to other places. It gives me better answers and so on and so forth. So the future of AI is not that much that we will have new tools for AI, but that the tools that we are using right now will be augmented with AI. And that means that, yes, VS Code, unless it gets replaced in a battle of AI, is going to be the place. And it already is in a way, right? When we talk about AI as a helper to do something, later on when they become more autonomous, like doing some operations, then they will be living in our clusters.
So what do we say to people coming out of university and they can't find that first job because they don't have 15 years experience and they're not hiring juniors anymore? How can somebody coming out of university be prepared for what the hiring is going to look like in 5 years?
I mean, they're going to be better prepared than many of those who have long experience, because whenever such drastic change happens, then people who have a lot of experience, they tend to ignore it as a defense mechanism, because what I try to explain is I have 20 years of experience with DB2. Don't come to me with those things. And then kids are going to be more prepared for it. Now, it cannot be with zero experience, but it's always problematic to find that first job. But once you land it, you're going to be moving faster than me, because simply you have nothing to unlearn.
Well, what if they're going into a location that isn't using AI?
Depends on whether you had a choice. Sometimes, and I tend to forget often, right? Sometimes you don't have much choice. But if you can choose experience over salary. Always. Always. If you can. I'm very aware that sometimes you can't. I would rather accept a junior position in a company that will allow me to develop further than a senior position in a company that will force me in a way to continue doing whatever I was doing so far.
What you're saying is, unless you really want to do another 40 years of DB2.
Exactly. And again, this is my personal, right? I am seeking to expand my skills. That's not a good idea for everybody. I admire people who stick with DB2. I admire people who stick with mainframe. And there's job for them as well. Things change, but not that fast. And whomever thinks that something is going to replace everything is a fool. And that person should be sent to the closest data center of the closest bank and take a look at all those mainframe servers. So I was more talking about me than recommendation to everybody. There is a great value in being the biggest expert on earth of something, even if that something is not cool anymore.
So we talked to the fresh out of university. Let's talk about the people like us. Now, you and I are probably about 10 years apart in age. I look at this and go, okay, I can understand the AI stuff. I can appreciate it. When I'm trying to do some coding changes, it's like, okay, yeah, this helps me, but it's still not doing enough for me. So it's not adding a ton of value to me. Is really the sweet spot probably somewhere between those of us in the later stages of career versus the earliest stages of career?
So the less you know, the more it helps, right? Because it's going to help me much less with Kubernetes, let's say, than you, because I'm probably more experienced with Kubernetes. So I don't need to ask it how to retrieve all the pods, right? And it's going to help me more than you probably in writing Java. Now it's helping both of us, because over time some things become muscle memory, and then I'm really not benefiting much from AI. I'm benefiting more from the things that are not muscle memory, right? The things that I need to think about. There are many things I don't think about because I did it 1,000 times before, right? And then it's not that helpful at this current stage. It will be, but that comes later.
You bring up an interesting point there. I wonder what's going to happen to people that aren't building muscle memory anymore because they are staying so focused on the AI helping them. So they never actually build the muscle memory because everything's just being auto-completed for them.
That's similar to some of the discussions we have right now in my family and around friends about the education of our kids. When I was going to school, we had to memorize a ton of things. I knew how much metal and gold is produced in every country in the world. Can you imagine that? Now tell me how useful that is.
It's not useful at all today.
Exactly. And I think that that's one of the big differences between older and newer generations is that younger people it's more ingrained in them to actually look for a solution rather to try to figure it out. And I see it as an advantage. Now, I'm not saying that replaces experience, just to be clear. The more experienced you are, the easier it is for you to look for a solution rather than try to come up with a solution, even though many came up with it before you. But still, it's part of younger generation's DNA, and I think that's a huge advantage.
Well, I think it's an advantage and a disadvantage because I believe there's something to, and maybe this is just old guy talking, I believe there's something important to knowing something and being able to do that something, going back to your muscle memory. You don't have to think about it. Versus, okay, I'm getting ready to do this, I have to go figure it out or go find it.
But there are two possible scenarios there. So let's say we have somebody very young, and let's say that we're talking a bit in the future when AI is better and what's not. Now, if that person is every day looking for different solutions, that person will not build muscle memory, right? But that means also that the job changed. And is asking that person to look for a different solution every day, right? Now, if that person Googles or asks AI for the same thing over and over again, then the muscle memory will be built. The question is how much variety we will have in the future. But if it ends up being the same over and over again, muscle memory will be built without AI, right? And if that doesn't happen, that means that actually we are not doing the same things over and over again. And I do the same things over and over again. I'm not sure whether that's how it will be in the future, because same things are the first things that will be replaced by AI. Kind of boring things, similar like in the past you would stop doing those repetitive tasks by finding a junior to do it for you.
So now if we can just get the AI to become our junior.
I think that's where we are getting, or we are almost already there, right? I described AI in that video as, right now that AI is a junior developer that happens to be faster than anybody else. He's not coming with brilliant solutions, not with best solutions, but he's like that kid that I say, hey, come up with 3 suggestions how we can generate a list in Go, and goes there and figures it out for me, right? And I still need to pick one. he's still incapable of giving me the best solution. But he comes and says, Viktor, these are all the ways that I found that you could do this. And I act as more as a reviewer and say, you know what? That one, with those small changes to it. I feel that with AI, I'm having that relationship. I'm more of a PR reviewer than a person creating PRs in the first place.
But you have to understand what's happening there. I think that's the key part. You've done it long enough to where when that PR comes in, you can say yes, no, tweak, whatever. But what can't be done is somebody that's just now starting out. They're not going to have the same context that you do and the same experience that you do in order to say yes or no on the PR. They're going to look at the PR. It's like, yeah, it looks good to me. Move on.
You know, the other day I looked at the history I have in Gemini, previously Bard. Do you know what is the most commonly, the thing that I typed more often than anything else? Try again. And that reminds me of a junior developer. Okay, hey, look, Viktor, I came up with this, and you look at it, it says, sometimes you say, it looks good, but change this thing, tweak this thing here. But sometimes it's, nope, go back, try again. Come tomorrow.
Maybe that's how we have to train ourselves today, is just to say, try again. Don't try to give it much more information unless it's really obvious. Just try again.
Yeah, it depends whether it's completely off. Kind of like, okay, this is completely missing the point, right? It's so much off the point that I cannot even start explaining what's wrong with it, right? Or sometimes you say, yeah, but can you optimize it? How about you use this library for HTTP requests instead of whatever you're using, right? You're guiding the junior developer as a senior developer, right? And I feel that I'm doing the same thing with AI.
But not everyone is capable of guiding. A lot of times, this is me talking right now. This is what I would do. It was like the old Saturday Night Live skit. The IT guy is like, they would come in and say, move, and I'd come in and take over, right? Unfortunately, that's how I'm wired. So treating the AI like junior, go try again. I don't have time for that. I need it now. I got somebody breathing down my neck now. I need the answer now.
But before you say move, do you take a look at it or you assume it's move no matter what you did?
Unfortunately, it's always move, no matter what happened.
Okay, there you have a serious human problem, man, then.
But that's what I'm saying. I'm not the only one that has this problem.
Yeah. But I do like move. But I try to take a look at it first. Maybe it's actually not that bad. Even if it's most of the time bad. Sometimes it's not.
Again, not only do we have to train the AI, we have to train ourselves to train the AI. That's the harder thing, I think.
That's the story. And with anything else, right? We're still debating things that I thought that we stopped debating. And we continue debating because there will always be some of us who will, 90% will reject any innovation. And then a bit later, that will drop to 80%. And eventually it will drop to 30%. And those 30% you will not move no matter what you do. And that's fine. There is always the need to maintain COBOL.
Yeah, you can always go to a bank or an insurance company and find a job.
And there is nothing wrong with it either. It depends what you want. What is wrong is saying we're never going to stop using DB2 because I say so, and behind the scenes means because I lose my position. Now, if you're good with DB2, don't prevent people from improving it. That's my hope, right? But there will always be some DB2 left over for you to manage. You don't need to keep them all.
And maybe you don't have to go from DB2 to Mongo or some other key value store. You just move from DB2 to MariaDB.
Postgres,
thank you. That's easier. So as you've listened to this today, What do you think? Are you scared for your job? Is the AI hype cycle about like blockchain to you, and it's just going to go away? Head over to the Slack workspace, go down to the podcast channel, look for episode number 260, and leave your comments there.
One thing I would add that, in my experience, people scared for their jobs are the first to lose the jobs.
I have to agree with you on that, even though we're already closed. I guess this is the extra. This is the overtime part of the episode today. If people are scared for their jobs, they're going to do irrational things, probably. If you're scared for your job, maybe it's time to go look for another job, so you don't have to be scared for your job, at least for another 5 or 10 years. But if you aren't scared for your job, maybe it's time to go look for another job anyway, because the place where you're at may not be moving fast enough for you. Tell us what you think. Head over to the Slack workspace, podcast channel, look for episode 260.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.